Welcome to this presentation on universal design and accessibility. Pause here to reflect on what you have done in your courses to implement universal design. I encourage you to compare your response to the ideas you generate throughout this presentation. Pause here to consider your answer to this question and your experiences that inform your answer. How many post-secondary students report having a disability? Approximately A, 5%, B, 10%, C, 20%, D, greater than 20%. The answer is D, greater than 20%. So how common are disabilities on campus? On a 2017 Canadian Undergraduate Survey Consortium survey of first-year students, 24% of respondents reported a disability. From 2001 to 2013, the reported prevalence increased 5 to 9%. In 2016, the reported prevalence increased to 22%, and in 2017, it increased to 24%. So what happened between 2013 and 2016? In 2016, wording on the survey was changed to include mental health issues. At UW in 2021, we have approximately 3,700 students registered with accessibility services compared to 1,700 in 2017. After viewing this presentation, you should be able to 1. Apply Universal Design, UD, principles to hypothetical teaching situations. 2. Empower yourself to reduce the need for accommodation by implementing UD principles and accessibility in your course environments, both online and in person. As instructors and learning designers, there are many reasons to care about universal design and accessibility. We know, based on experience and research, there is no such thing as an average learner. Our students have a variety of experiences, learning preferences, and disabilities, and we play an important role in promoting access for all of them. When we implement UD, or just good design, we help everyone learn. We will also unpack our legal responsibility to be accessible later in this presentation. Let's unpack the phrase, "There is no such thing as an average learner." Looking at these 4 students, you cannot tell if they have a disability or other needs. Nathan, on the far left, cannot hear well because of small group chatter in tutorials and would benefit from a quiet space to participate in group work. Neela, second from the left, is a caregiver for a parent with cancer and would benefit from flexible deadlines and optional tutorial attendance. English is not Addison, third from the left, first language. They would benefit from written content in addition to listening to the lecture. Raj, on the far right, uses a computer mic and screen reader for writing essays and therefore requires accessible course materials to fully participate. Our learners are diverse and all benefit when we design learning using universal design. Universal design aims to improve access to all students, like Nathan, Neela, Addison, and Raj, by removing barriers. In the first picture on the left, there is a systemic barrier, the wooden fence. So the soccer game is only viewable for average users. The assumption is that everyone can benefit from the same supports regardless of their needs. In the second picture, in the middle, the systemic barrier is still there, but different supports are provided for different needs. Those with disabilities get the support they need to mitigate the barrier. In other words, they get an accommodation. In the third picture, on the right, the systemic barrier is removed. There is less need to request accommodation because the barrier has been removed for all. Our goal in universal design is to remove unnecessary barriers so all learners can participate. But it is important to note that universal design limits the need for accommodation, but does not eliminate the need for accommodation. There are many terms surrounding universal design, but they are each different and not interchangeable, although they can intersect. Here are just three. They are all important, so let's look at each one. Inclusive design, universal design, UD, accessibility. Inclusive design is the most far-reaching of these terms. It seeks to include the full spectrum of users and identify those who are marginalized or edge cases. It focuses on intersectional factors, including identity, for example, race, culture, gender, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, and beliefs, both religious and worldview. It focuses on circumstances, for example, ability, language, living situation, and geography. And it focuses on behavior and environment, for example, mood, location, context of use, device type, for example, mobile, and internet connection. For example, with inclusive design, we consider users with poor internet or no internet, those with low bandwidth who need to turn off video and just listen to a presentation. We consider neurodiverse participants who have difficulty in large crowds. And we consider who is represented in photos. Will Black students, people of color, overweight students, and students with disabilities see themselves in the images chosen? Universal design was developed by an architect in the 1970s. Its focus is on equitable use that does not disadvantage or stigmatize any group of users. Universal design strives to remove the divide. It is not one design for people with disabilities and another for everyone else. It is one design for all. Universal design recognizes that accommodations for people with disabilities are beneficial to people without disabilities. For example, closed captions do not just benefit those who are deaf or hard of hearing. They improve learning for those who are still learning English, those who process information better from seeing the written word, those viewing the presentation in a busy coffee shop with free internet, and those who experience technological glitches and can't access their audio. While universal design strives to design for as many users as possible, it doesn't address all the intersectional factors that inclusive design considers. Accessibility focuses on persons with disabilities. It is the design of products, devices, services, or environments for people who experience disabilities.
Accessibility legislation doesn't clearly tell us everything we need to do. It points us to web content accessibility guidelines. We're not going to go through all of those guidelines in this presentation, but we will go through some guiding strategies to help you get started.
Regarding accessibility legislation, you need to be aware of the duty to accommodate. In brief, this duty means that when you are notified by accessibility services, you must accommodate a student except to the point of undue hardship. If you have questions about what constitutes undue hardship in each situation, we encourage you to contact accessibility services. Before we move on, let's recap our key terms. Importantly, design needs to first be accessible. If it is not accessible, it is not universal or inclusive. Each of these three terms requires proactive design. This means that we intentionally think about diversity at the start of course design. These are not afterthoughts. Given our new or developing understanding of the three terms, let's return for a moment to universal design and look at these three familiar entrances. In the first picture on the left, the entrance is not accessible. In the second picture in the middle, the entrance is accessible via the ramp, but because it is separated from the stairs, it is stigmatizing. This can represent an accommodation. In the third picture on the right, the barrier is removed and the entrance is accessible to all. A person pushing a cart benefits from the automatic door in the same way that a person in a wheelchair does. The stigma is also removed. In other words, this entrance is both universal and more inclusive, although there are other considerations for inclusivity at building entrances that go well beyond the architectural. Pause here to reflect on this scenario. What would you do? In your in-person class, you notice your students are not paying attention, but instead spend their time playing online games. You want to ask everyone to put away their laptops and devices, but you know two of your students require technology to fully participate in your lesson. After reflecting on your response to the scenario on the previous slide, consider whether your response respected students' privacy. You must respect students' privacy. Hopefully, you did not tell everyone except the students who needed their laptops to do their work to put their laptops away. A better approach would be reminding everyone to stay on task and use their technology to support their learning rather than for entertainment or socializing while in class. We have so far unpacked a lot of background regarding universal design. Now, recalling that there are many more, let's turn our attention to 5 universal design instructional strategies. And remember, start small and make 1 or 2 changes that you're comfortable with. Small changes can make a big difference. Web content accessibility guidelines state that content must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. What does this mean? Let's look more closely at perceivable and operable, as well as helpful resources that will help you apply these principles without too much extra work. Perceivable means information and user interface components must be presentable to users in ways they can perceive. For example, Perceivable content is distinguishable through minimum contrast or low or no background audio. Operable means user interface components and navigation must be operable. For example, operable content is navigable through page titles and headings. The accessibility checklists will step you through checking your PowerPoint presentations, Word documents, and face-to-face presentations to ensure they meet accessibility principles. Navigate to the Universal Design and Accessibility Content module, then the Accessibility Links submodule, and finally the Accessibility Checklists folder. Variety means increasing opportunities for students to learn by presenting information in different ways throughout the course. Flexibility means offering choice in your instruction. Supportive class climate means an environment that values diversity and inclusivity. Minimize unnecessary effort means designing learning so your students use their cognitive energy to process your message. One way you can do this is by using the Learn templates provided in this Learn course. In this Learn course, you will find an activity that you can complete on your own to further your understanding of the 5 universal design instructional strategies just discussed. Here is a copy of the table that you'll find when you download the activity handout. You can enter your own teaching events to help you think through how you can apply the universal design instructional strategies of accessibility, variety, flexibility, supportive class climate, and minimize unnecessary effort in your own course. We want to acknowledge that accommodations are not only for students. Although we have outlined how we can use universal design in our teaching by making course environments that are accessible, variable, supportive, flexible, and minimize unnecessary effort. But what do you do if you require accommodation to complete your teaching duties? Employees of the university fall under the Human Resources Accommodation process. It is your responsibility to notify the university if accommodations are required to complete teaching duties. Remember, universal design is good design.